You can see our small form factor power supply, our really nice T-Force RAM with beautiful RGB, really bright. The white looks great. Hey everyone, Digital David here. Today in this video, I'm going to be checking out the coolermaster Masterbox NR200P. I did receive this product to review from coolermaster, but any opinion expressed in this video is strictly my own. That being said, if you are interested in this product, you want to find out more about it, the link to it will be in the video description. You can see the retail box and packaging right here, walking us through some of the key tech specs and features for this particular case. You also may notice on the front down here in the corner, we have our color. This is Caribbean blue. I'm really excited to see this color in person because I built in purple and orange and they're fantastic. They look so good. So I have high expectations for this particular color. This is the tempered glass version. They have multiple options available fitting your budget and preference. Now let's go ahead, let's open it up and look at the contents. Here are all the contents. First up, you can see we have our user guide and manual right here walking us through everything we need to know about our new case. So it has all the different configuration options for you, everything laid out nice and easy to understand. Going over GPU installation, motherboard installation, power supply installation, SSD and hard drive installation with additional info on the back, going over your cooling options. If you want to use a liquid cooling setup, an AIO, you can see how they're mounted here. Or if you want to mount your own pump, you can see the pump mounting options we have, as well as fan configuration settings. Next up, you may notice we have a box titled Masterbox NR200P Accessories. In this box, you can open it up to reveal the two included fans that are identical to each other. So let's go ahead, let's grab one out of the box. You can see it right here. Flipping it over to the back side, it's the SickleFlow 120 non-LED version. So you can see that, two of those. We have our fan splitter cable right here for both of those. And then underneath, we have additional accessories right here. So check it out. You can see we have our GPU riser mount, nice and small and compact. And then you can see we have all of our included hardware with our screws, our standoffs, zip ties, everything right there. Lastly, you can see we have the case itself. Let's go ahead, let's look at that in more detail. So looking at the unit from the top, you can see we have our white mesh cover with our Caribbean blue accents for the power button, USB ports, reset button, headphone jack, white stripe along the side, that solid metal in between the mesh. This top panel is removable. Next up, you can see the front panel right here. Everything looks great. We have our coolermaster logo and branding. This is also removable. There's a handle at the bottom you can use to pull off as needed. Next up, you can see the bottom of the case right here. Check it out. We have our 4 feet that are raised up off the ground to give us some air circulation down here. We also have a removable magnetic mesh cover. You can see what it looks like with it removed. Next, you can see the back of the case right here with our power plug connector, where our motherboard's going to go, our GPU mounting options right here, whether it's horizontal or vertical. You may notice too, we have to peel this piece up and pull it up and out to remove the top cover. Next up, you can see the left side panel right here. If you're looking at the front of the case, this is removable, and this is the one we're going to replace with the included tempered glass. Lastly, you can see the right side panel right here. This is also removable. Now let's go ahead, let's take the panels off and look at the case. Here's a look at the case with all the panels removed. First up from the top, you can see how everything looks from that bird's eye view with our power supply bracket right here. Let's go ahead, let's flip it around. You can see it from the back side as well. This basically mounts flush, so all your cable management will have to be on the inside of this piece or down below right here, tucked away inside. You can see the back. We'll look at it from the front now. We have a removable hard drive bracket, so keep that in mind. You can install hard drives on this bracket, or you can remove it by just getting rid of those 2 screws and taking the bracket out. You can see all of our cables in here as well that are included for us for our front panel connectors. And then you can look at the very front of the case right here, and you can see our different pump mounting options if you want to do some custom loops and water cooling with this case. Now let's go ahead, let's get our PC built. So here's our build, check it out, everything looks great. I really love this Caribbean blue color scheme with our white accents along the case and inside. It looks really sharp. Now let's go ahead, let's look at it up close. So here's the unit up close, check it out, everything looks great. We have our coolermaster Master Liquid ML240 Illusion White Edition on the bottom. If you do want to use an AIO, your only options are to mount it here or on the included hard drive bracket. You can see our small form factor power supply, our really nice T-Force RAM with beautiful RGB, really bright. The white looks great. Same with the fans and on the cooler pump housing. Our Gigabyte white motherboard. So it's really small and compact. It's really not the easiest build, but not the hardest build for a small form factor case, but there's just not a lot of space between all the connections and everything like that. So you can see how we chose to route everything. We tried to hide a lot behind the fans up at the top, and I tucked a lot into the front panel. Now let's go ahead, let's look at the front panel and we'll look at the back panel. So here's our front panel and you can see how we tried to route and hide the cables right here. You could tie them on, you can get creative with how you want to do that, but I was happy with how everything came together right there. And again, don't forget, depending on the build you're going with, we have our pump mount options as well in here. And you can get a feel for the thickness. There is a little bit of room to work with if you do want to tuck something extra in here. And now you can see our back panels removed. We have our fan for our power supply exhausting out this way. And there is a little bit of room for cable management. You can see how we tied everything in back here. But keep in mind, this is so thin. There's just not that much room. You can't do much more than what you see here, like one cable coming over, because you have to be able to get this cover back on. And again, there's not a lot of clearance with this case. So it is something I'd like to see in the future. Could they extend this out maybe just a little bit more? A couple more millimeters, something like that, half an inch, quarter of an inch. So we could have a nice channel back here to route all of our cables, but you can do a lot underneath. So you could go through the back if you built it and knew what you wanted to do beforehand, try to route it up that channel from the back. But if not, it'd be nice to have on this side a little bit of a groove or a little bit more space so we could route some more cables as needed. So first up, you can see our idle temps right here. We're showing around 40 degrees Celsius for the motherboard and around 35 degrees Celsius for the CPU. That's with the panels on at idle. Now let's go ahead, let's look at those temps with both panels off at idle. Now you can see the results with the panel off. They're around the same temperatures as you would expect, so this is doing a pretty good job. Now keep in mind, with this particular build, I have a really goofy layout where we have our radiator at the bottom and it's actually blowing the hot air down and out, and we're also blowing our hot air up and out. So technically, with those panels off on the side, we could be getting even more of that warm air back in the build. So with the panels off, it might actually start to be hotter than with the panels on. That's just for how we built this one to look. That won't necessarily be your instance depending on how you put your build together with this case. I've built in the purple and orange versions of this case, and I've never had any issues at all with my thermals. So now we have Cinebench R23 running with our panels on. I do want to point out, for both the idle test and this 100% CPU load test, to build up as much heat as possible, we have the fans at the quiet setting within Gigabyte's own software. So they're spinning basically as slow as possible. So we're going to build up the most heat as possible. So you can see, you know, at the end of the day, what would basically be the hottest temps you get with this case and cooler combo. So we peaked right under 90 degrees Celsius. It held steady at 80 degrees Celsius for a while, and I was really impressed that it was staying at 80, but then it shot up more. It's like, that would be what you would expect, again, given this situation with our cooler at the bottom and exhausting air down and out through the radiator, as well as not having any direct air intake from the top sides or anything like that. And these two fans up top exhausting out, which really aren't doing much at all, since there's really no warm air coming out here. It's all coming out the bottom from our radiator and CPU. So worst case scenario, you will see something similar, but chances are, depending on how you configure your build, it will be substantially cooler. I would say I would expect around 70 degrees Celsius probably be what you would peak at. And you can see even right now, after this thing's been warmed up for over 20 minutes at our 100% load, our temps have continued to drop and our CPU's at 65 degrees Celsius. So we peaked right under 90. It held steady for a while at 80, but again, that's with really low fan speed settings. So we're trying to make it difficult and hard for the PC, CPU, and cooler to cool, and it's doing a great job in my opinion. So I'm really impressed with the thermal performance given the uniqueness of this particular build and how we put everything together. For looks, as opposed to performance. Now let me share with you my final thoughts in regards to the Cooler Master NR200P. I love this case. This is my third build in it. It's a lot of fun. I would argue small form factor builds are a little bit more challenging due to the size and space constraints, but I think we did a pretty good job getting it all together. It looks really presentable. The color scheme really is what makes this case. That's my favorite thing about this case and why I enjoy building in it. I think they just look so cool. It's a nice little showpiece to have on your desk, your shelf, things like that. This just looks really nice. So choose your favorite color. They look so good. It'll look way better in person than even what you're seeing here on camera. It just doesn't do it justice. Now, a couple things I want to point out. I would not recommend using an AIO in this build. If that's the way you want to go, then do some sort of custom loop yourself. They do have pump mounts for you, and I think it'll look a lot better and you'll actually save space, ironically. They're just really hard to make this all work together, in my opinion, from the builds that I've done. So I'd recommend just getting a low profile air cooler. That way too, it's not blocking anything. You can do additional RGB fans maybe at the top and the bottom, and then you can see everything in your build. That also relates to GPU mounting. I do like that we have the flexibility and capability to mount our GPUs vertically in this build. That does help with the space issues. If you are going to mount an AIO on the bottom like we did, you will most likely have to mount your GPU vertically, so keep that in mind. And if you're mounting your GPU vertically, it's going to block all the other parts and components. So unless you have a really cool GPU that has a ton of like RGB fans or things like that, then having the window here isn't going to be something that really matters to you because you're not going to be able to see anything anyway. So at that point, just get the non-windowed version and appreciate having a lot more of a really cool case to look at. It'll be a panel just like the backside. Now, obviously, this version comes with the tempered glass and that additional panel, so you could swap them out as desired. But if you are planning ahead and you know you're going to mount your GPU vertically and it doesn't look that good, or you don't want, to see it necessarily, don't buy really fancy parts and components because they're going to be blocked, right? So that's really what I want you to understand there. And my recommendation is go ahead, save yourself some hassle. Just do a low profile air cooler for your CPU and you'll be in really good shape with this case. But it's really nice, small, compact, and they look so good in person.